here. Yeah. So, it's an interesting reflection on what's going on right now in this country, frankly, with the advent of big tech censorship, in which I would describe as an informal form of fascism. Not, in the Nazi sense that they're into race theory or anything like that, certainly, but I mean it more in the political and socio-political sense, in that fascism is an informal collusion, merge between government oligarchs and select monopolistic private sector entities. I went over yesterday a bit about how this generally happens to a certain degree informally, in that there's always this unspoken rule that media outlets, means of communication, maintain a level of patriotism and a level of respect for the order of the society in which they operate. That's a given. But if you're going to have Congress setting up truth commissions to decide what's true, and you're going to have, it's a matter of degrees, a matter of raising that level to the point where it represents the enforcement or potential enforcement of a particular point of view at the expense of another, when both points of view or multiple points of view are generally legitimate, are not calling for violence, are not calling for overthrow of the government, are not calling for, are not racist or ethnocentric in their, kind of lumping people together as a group and making nasty false claims. That's something that we all, I hope, agree is not permissible. And but more to do with political opinion, whether or not you support former President Donald Trump, whether or not you believe the election might have been tampered with. These are legitimate discussions that ought to be had in a free society. So that's really what I refer to when I talk about a collusion and an informal form of fascism. Now we're waiting here for Ari Hoffman. Where is he? Let me just send a note asking for him to sign on. Let me just click an invite and make sure he has the proper invitation. All right, I've got that done. And let me go to his publicist and send them a note. Where is he? Basically, okay. Okay. And he should be here shortly. I just sent him again the invitation, so that should do it. Anyway, getting back, I mean, there we go. We're streaming okay. Everything looks like it's functioning well. Let me just see, where is my Zoom chat? There it is. Okay, so let's hope he's here shortly. Let me just X out of this. And let me make that smaller, and off we go. So, yeah, I mean, we're moving into this the great and glorious new age, the so-called reset, which is just another repackaging, remarketing of the New World Order, I would suggest. Let me give out the phone number. You're welcome to call in. I am doing this live program, and I am able to take calls. It's pretty amazing, actually. 617-396-4958. 617-396-4958 is the phone number. If you would like to join the program, you can call in. It is a phone call. It's not a video. It is just like as if this was an old-fashioned radio talk show where we take calls, although I would urge people and caution people to please use community standards. Don't use, any, swear words. Don't use certainly the N word, and don't use any racial terms. I didn't know you were in Massachusetts. Yes, I am in Massachusetts. I'm in Boston. That's where I come from. That's where I am. So, yeah, I mean, please, again, the phone number, if you'd like to join the program, I'm waiting for my guest, is 617-396-4958. That number again is 617-396-4958. Let's see if I can find out where Mr. Hoffman is, if there's any word on that. Let's see. So far, no. Let me just cross that out and see. Let's see. Okay. No, I don't see anything. Well, I'll give him another couple of minutes and we'll see what happens. I mean, he was on my schedule. Who knows what's going on? Look, I've complained about the fact that my program is being stymied by algorithm. And I'm not saying that because I'm making it up. I've actually been told by and contacted by a couple of people who, and this is evidence, on YouTube anyways, and I don't know about TikTok, but I do know that my TikTok numbers have halted. For a while, I was gaining traction. I was up to I now have 7,900 members. I'm hoping to reach 10,000, but it stalled. It just, it like stopped. Maybe I pick up, maybe he doesn't have electricity. Yeah, that's possible. He's in Seattle. And yeah, that very well may be, so we're having a huge influx of global warming in the United States right now. And it's pretty bad, especially apparently in the South and in Texas, where the state is not used to it. They're not set up for this kind of problem with icy roads. I mean, you've got, power lines iced over. You've got, major blackout. I think that, I don't know if this is because of the storm or if it's because of situations like what's going on in California, where you have just blackouts are becoming almost a way of life. Is it because we're not keeping up with energy? Is it because we have an old, antiquated grid? Probably. It's certainly something that, I've heard some pretty wild stories about. I'm not going to get into that, but it's certainly something that we should investigate. Yeah, exactly. He may not have electricity right now. So if he doesn't have electricity, then that's, what can you do? What can you do? All right. In the meantime, I'm going to take calls. So welcome to the program. Please call up, call in. What's on your mind? It's kind of an open line situation. 617-396-4958. 617-396-4958. What are you guys up to in this time of pandemic? What are people thinking? Are you getting ready to take the vaccine? Are you concerned about that? I do plan to get the vaccine. Certainly, my family is can't wait to get the vaccine. But I'll tell you this, I feel like before I go forward with it, I might make sure that my last will and testament is written so that in case I die from it, my family knows what to do. It's maybe that's my own suspicion of things as they are. I just maybe after doing radio for all these years, I have come to take somewhat of a jaundiced eye to events as they unfold. I take a look at underlying agendas. I wonder if what's going on, is this a population control event? On the other hand, I see good people, good liberals even taking the vaccine without a problem. Of course, the people taking the vaccine right now are elderly. So, it's kind of hard to tell. And we have to watch for what are the long-term effects. But, and no vaccine, good. Okay, well, that's a personal choice. But what we do know is, however it's happening, whether it be because of the vaccine, or whether it be by natural causes, or whether it be because of the building of herd immunity, the virus is going down, and that's good news. It's dropping demonstrably and unexpectedly, I may point out. And there's an interesting report today. I didn't read the article, I just started it, but it shows how the states of California and Florida handled their approach to the virus completely differently. And yet the results have been basically the same. What shot Joe just did this week? There was no shot when got in office. Okay, I don't know what that means, but you're certainly welcome to join the program, and you're welcome to join us live here by phone at 617-396-4958. That number again is 617-396-4958. And I'm waiting for my guest, who doesn't appear to be, probably it's true, he might have had, a blackout. He might have lost electricity. His article, I might as well read it, is watch Democrat Congresswoman says America needs a truth commission to create common narrative. California Democrat Representative Sarah Jacobs told CNN's Brian Stelter that the United States needs a, quote, truth commission so a, quote, common narrative can be set forth. If big tech continues censoring conservatives, that means our days on these platforms may be numbered. Please take a minute, and this is, they want me to sign up for the Post Millennial, which is a Seattle-based paper. California Democrat Representative Sarah Jacobs told CNN's Brian Stelter that the United States needs a, quote, truth commission so that a, quote, common narrative can be set forth. Representative Jacobs explained to Stelter that a truth commission could be one solution for sorting out the different conflicting political narratives in the United States by having one government narrative of history and political events. I mean, this, of course, raises the question, why would anyone certainly in our government, but generally in our culture, view the idea of having one narrative as a virtue? Isn't that what they do in the Soviet Union or Nazi Germany? I mean, they have one narrative. All other narratives are to be purged. I mean, since when is that virtuous? Why do we need the one narrative? It's interesting that fascists, communists, they always position themselves as opposed to the natural, diverse, even anarchistic nature and tendencies of a free society. They always say, well, we have gridlock, we have division, we have differences that are making us paralyzed, and that we're going to come along and make everything uniform. We're going to come along and help the society move forward, with one voice. And that in a sense, they are denying the fact that a society has progressed to a point where there are certain consensuses. And at the same time, by claiming that the present condition is one by which there is no consensus and there is no unity, they want to present themselves as the arbiters of consensus and of unity, one particular point of view. And that's not how consensus is arrived at. We arrive at various consensus over over decades, over long periods of time, and due to very complex aspects through divisions and the debate that occurs as a result of those divisions. And we can't be afraid to have those debates. And sometimes those debates can be extremely contentious and controversial. And sometimes we have to welcome in people who do have extreme opinions because they influence our society and our culture. And not because we agree with them, but because we want to get to truths. We want to go through a process, a dialectical process, as a means to getting to truths, not as a means of suppressing truths. And even when we get to those truths, anything is up for debate. That's why that's a natural aspect of rights. This is what the Constitution recognized formally when they put it in writing: free speech, free press, right to assemble, redress of grievances, free faith, free religion. We're free to, in a sense, embrace whatever it is that we're embracing. The degrees to which we're right or wrong, those are all things that we can arrive at through vigorous and, at times, I suppose, ribald, but nevertheless vigorous and earnest debate. And so this idea that we need to have one narrative, we need to have one consensus, as this congresswoman says, she wants to have a common narrative. Really? What about a common narrative that recognizes that America should be put first? That's a common narrative. I don't think she's talking about that. She wants to, what she's really talking about, I would suggest, and I think that evidence would prove this out, is that she wants to purge people who support President Trump and anyone who's affiliated with Trump. That's what this is about. That's why she's talking to Brian Stelzer. She goes, let me go on in the article. Because we haven't really done the reckoning with the racial injustice, here we go, and white supremacy of our past that we need to do. And so a truth commission, a lot of people will think of South Africa. We've used them in countries around the world, Jacob stated. Okay, so now she's bearing in a little bit more specifically on what she means. She wants a truth commission to bring about a racial justice, an addressing of racial injustice and white supremacy. She does at least say in our past. And yeah, I mean, look, I think that it's generally acknowledged that in the de facto sense, this nation has been white supremacist. I don't think there's any debate on that. We were dominated by people who happen to be white from the time of our founding, with the early English colonies right up till today. The dominant race in this country, if we have to talk race, has been white. And thus white people, at least implicitly, if not explicitly, have tilted the scales in their favor. That's a given. If you look at it in the broader context, which I think is important, you would have to say that one of the reasons why this is an issue in the United States is because we are racially diverse, right? Always have been. We've always had African Americans in this country since before colonial times. And even back then, we defined race differences differently. Back then, we viewed Irish people as not white. It was always been anyone who was not English. But even by today's standards, which everyone's white who is very specific. Meaning by today's standards, I'm thought of as white, whereas I would not have been maybe 100 years ago. Given that factor, America's diversity of race is an element of our tensions, whereas that may not exist in a homogeneous society or a more homogeneous society, such as societies that you would find in Europe, like Sweden or Norway or Germany or Great Britain. although that's changed. But historically, we're talking. Or for that matter, societies in Africa, like Zimbabwe or Mali or Ghana or Songhai or any of the great African empires which were black, or societies like Saudi Arabia where everyone is Arab, or China or India. So, yeah, we have more racial diversity than many of these countries which are more homogenous. And thus we do have some tensions that are affiliated with that. And we do and historically have had the white race as being the dominant race. That is a fact of history. Is that really what they want to address? Or do they want to purge people that they don't like? She also talks about racial injustice. Yes, historically. Look, we ought to have that conversation. I've had this conversation. Bill Clinton, as president, called for a national conversation on race. And I've always agreed with that. Let's have it. Let's talk about ideas and political systems and social systems that have damaged minorities in this country. I would argue that most of those you would find on the left, but they don't want to have that conversation. They want to politicize this and weaponize it as a weapon to be used against anyone who does not genuflect to the left. I would say, let's do it. Who are the real racists? Will they please stand up? I'm not saying left-wingers are racist in the formal sense, although there is a eugenic strain within their belief system. And eugenics itself has always been a liberal left thing, a progressive idea. That changed after World War II when the stench of the results of it in Germany was so strong that they had to remarket it. But it was generally opposed by Christians. It was opposed by conservatives. It was opposed by the pro-life movement as it was back then. I mean, it was called something different. And I think it's those same people that oppose it today. So, if they want to talk white supremacy and they want to talk racism, fine. I say bring it on. Let's have that conversation. No, but they don't. Instead, they want to engage in the use of shorthand language to label their political opponents by means of isolating words that very well may be offensive and hurtful, but that really don't go beyond that, and they want to weaponize that. I mean, take a look, for example, recently of this guy who was the host of The Bachelor. I think his name is Michael Harrison, who's been dismissed. I don't know if he was fired, but he was removed from his position. Apparently he had been there for years. And he was removed because he defended one of the contestants who had attended like a Southern party or something with an antebellum, wearing hoop dresses and doing, kind of like Southern costume. What was that party racist? And it was held at a plantation. I don't know if it was racist or not. I would probably bet it wasn't. Probably there were African Americans there. But the Irish are considering it might be pragmatic to return to the definition of being non-white, at least for the next decade. Yeah, and look at it. It's very fashionable now to be non-white because in our present political atmosphere, you actually have advantages. Because it's a way to cause racial justice and to end white supremacy. If you are, for example, an African American in this country today, and you want to get ahead and you want to achieve, like we all do, you have some advantages, and why not? It's attractive, it's like, and if you're white, if you're deemed as white, the state declares you as white. You have some disadvantages. I know, like, I've had to fill out over time, certain applications and things, and they ask me what my race is. They say, oh, you don't have to tell us. But I happen to know that if I check off white, I'm not going to be held to an advantage. I mean, when I ran my own company and I did business with some major media groups like Disney and others, I'm not going to mention names. This is a long time ago. That company's gone now. But I remember they would send me questionnaires. What is my race? Because they wanted to get points for hiring a company that had a non-white person as head of it. And I remember one time I refused to answer, or I think I put not white, and I got more inquiries. And then if I'm not white, what am I? They really bored down. They wanted to know. It's not a colorblind situation. They get bonuses if I were black or if I were Hispanic or Asian or some other group they were trying to promote. And, in an informal sense, I certainly get that. It's not a bad idea to try to help somebody that's a minority just to give a more diverse point of view. But to have that so formal and to have that like, oh, you're not going to get this contract, we're going to put somebody else in front of you. I mean, doesn't anybody agree with me that that's a bit distasteful in a free society? I mean, I suppose that maybe you could say that it's no more distasteful than nepotism, but in a way it is a form of nepotism. And when the government gets involved formally, it becomes a legalized form of nepotism, and that's wrong. So, all right, we're still waiting for my guest. I think that that it's probably true that he's been waylaid by a blackout. So I'll have him back when things get back to normal for him. But let me go on with his article. So this Congresswoman, Sarah Jacobs, is calling for a truth commission, similar to what they had in South Africa after apartheid, where people were put on trial, basically. I mean, I suppose you could say it's what happened in Nazi Germany after Hitler, the Nuremberg trials. Interesting that it never happened in Russia, never happened in a communist country. There was never like there was a denazification in Germany, and rightfully, but never a decommunization in Russia. Putting that aside, on with the article. Basically, what it is, communities all the way up to the national level having conversations about both the gory and the glory of our history and what happened, both throughout the history of our country and leading up to and on January 6th, so that we can come to a common narrative moving forward of what we want our country to be, she explained. Now, again, it's troubling that a sitting representative in Congress would be talking about this because, let's face it, a congressperson is a lawmaker, and they're in a position where they could legalize or craft legislation that might legalize certain points of view. And that's un-American. That's for the same reason that I say that to criminalize hate speech is un-American. You cannot criminalize opinion, even if it's despicable opinion. I mean, if somebody hurts someone else, like if you have a racist person who damages you because you're black, and let's say they beat you up because they don't like black people, or they openly discriminate, I'm going to stop you from something because I don't like black people, and it harms you directly, then you bring a lawsuit, and if they violated laws, and you use their bigotry, their hate as evidence, that is evidence, clearly, and should be. And it's something that can be presented to and evaluated by a jury to get to motivation in terms of what caused you to commit the crime. If there's a murder and the victim is a minority and the killer had racist tendencies or was a racist and trying to kill you because they don't like black people, then the fact that they were a racist is evidence to be evaluated by a jury. But there's a big difference, a huge difference, between looking at evidence that involves hateful intent to go toward the proof of a crime and the actual criminalization of the opinion itself. That's where you cross a line, because that is an un-American activity, I would suggest. In this country, we do not criminalize opinion. We criminalize action. Now, there are some exceptions, like you cannot call for the assassination of someone. That is criminal, particularly if it's a political figure. It's sort of like what Chief Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes said: free speech stops when one yells fire in a crowded theater. You're harming people directly. But if you simply harbor ugly, immoral opinions, you can't, those opinions themselves, I don't know, maybe I'm being too nuanced here, I don't know. But those opinions themselves in a free society cannot be criminalized. The actions that might emanate from them, if they can be directly linked to them, can be criminalized, the actions. And that the bigotry, the hate is, again, evidence of intent. But if we're going to start to criminalize speech in the formal sense, then we are heading for a very authoritarian system, because that's what they do, for example, in communist China. You become an enemy of the state. The state decides what is proper and improper to communicate. And if you are viewed as an enemy of the state because of your opinions, then in Chinese system or in communist systems or Nazi systems, you have committed a crime and people have been executed for this. In fact, Amnesty International, a couple of years ago, which publishes a list of executions around the world, noted that communist China executes an average of 50,000 people per year who have committed, quote, political crimes, not crimes like you and I would think of as crimes, like breaking and entering or larceny or embezzlement or murder or violence or rape. These are crimes. These are actions. But rather, they have engaged in political crimes. And in this country, the version of that is hate crimes. We're going to be creating political crimes. And that's wrong. You cannot persecute a person in a free society for their opinions, regardless of how repugnant or wrong or immoral those opinions may be. Incitement and slander are not protected free speech. I think you're comparing apples and oranges. No, incitement and slander are not free speech. If you slander a person, in other words, or if you commit libel, which is slander in writing, then that's a crime because you have specifically damaged a person's reputation. And a person's reputation is an integral part of their property. Property is not necessarily a physical thing. It's not like hubcaps on a car or, like a car. Property is intellectual property, it's personal property, it's reputation. And if you can demonstrate that a person slandered your reputation and by doing so threatened, if not outright compromised, your ability to conduct yourself in the material world, get a job, earn income, then that's a crime and that's punishable. But that's not, when we're talking about hate speech here, we're not talking about the slander of an individual. We're talking about opinions that might have led to a crime. There's a difference. That's only if what is written was a lie. Well, yeah, that's right. I mean, if you mention something about someone else, I mean, I know I can think of like the National Enquirer was sued by what's her name, Carol Burnett, because they had said that she was publicly drunk. That was slander. That hurt her reputation. They had to prove that in a courtroom because they had made this accusation And I think that they settled it out of court and lost, because you can't just do that. You can't march forth and make an accusation about someone that is untrue or that you can't prove or cannot have evidence of. I mean, if you hear about it third hand, that's not evidence, unless you're a whistleblower against Trump, in which case it is, but that's another subject. You have to have proof. You have to have witnesses. You have to have firsthand evidence. You have to have testimony. You have to have an affidavit. You have to swear it and swear that this happened in front of a court under oath. And if you do that, then, yeah, I mean, someone can't just say something about you that is untrue. I think that there is a little bit of leeway when it comes to public figures, because public figures have a level of immunity themselves. And in the interest of a broader definition of free speech, we can make comments about a public official that might not necessarily fall in the same parameters as comments about a private citizen, because a person who is an elected public official or even an appointed public official is in a position of trust, and they're in a position where they can influence the outcome of your life. So therefore, you can say more about them than you might be able to say about any private person. So anyways, how do we get off on this? Let me get back to the article here. I'm still waiting for my guest. It looks like he's not going to be coming today. He's probably dealing with a blackout. That being Ari Hoffman, who is he's a political analyst who's written an article. California Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs wants America to have a truth commission. You're welcome to join the conversation. 617-396-4958. I'm doing an open lines program while I wait for Ari. I don't think he's coming, but I'll do it. I'll reschedule him for another day. 617-396-4958. You can talk about this issue or any other issue you care to get into. It's an open lines program. Let me see what time it is. Okay. Back to the article. Stelter then asked if Jacobs thought Congress had, quote, the stomach for, unquote, having those sorts of conversations. I think so, Jacobs replied. Now, again, we're talking about her call for a truth commission like they had in South Africa after apartheid, the Truth and Reconciliation, a legal commission of Congress which can take testimony, which can hear, question people, bring people in with subpoenas, recommend convictions. I mean, this is a very powerful thing. And this is a truth commission. Basically, I mean, she says to uncover white supremacy. What they're really talking about is a truth commission to try to purge this country of President Trump and his supporters. That's what they're really talking about. Let's be honest, okay? They're not going to have a truth commission to talk about the communist influence on America. In fact, they did back in the 1950s, the House Un-American Activities Committee, and that went under vigorous attack. She went on to explain that the impeachment trial was, quote, just the start. See, here we go. Now this is where she kind of, I wouldn't say let the cat out of the bag, even though that's from my perspective, but it's more proudly declaring of holding Donald Trump accountable for the Capitol riot on January 6th. You know something? They are not going to let go of that. I hope there is an investigation of that. Let me just comment on that briefly. I think that from what I understand, the security of the U.S. Capitol is the purview of the Congress itself and the Speaker of the House, who's Nancy Pelosi. So that particular responsibility falls on Nancy Pelosi. She is the Speaker of the House. and this is based on precedent, that it's the Speaker of the House who decides on questions directly pertaining to the Capitol building, including security. And that it was a couple of days before the Capitol incursion that the Sergeant at Arms and the Speaker of the House received information, probably from the FBI, maybe from other sources, that there might be a security problem when there was a joint session of Congress, and that they should call the National Guard. The House Sergeant at Arms, who, for all intents and purposes, was speaking for the Speaker of the House. If he wasn't, then that's a problem, because the Speaker of the House is where the buck stops in terms of what happens with Congress. His response to this recommendation was not to do it, not to call out National Guard forces, because he didn't like the optics. They didn't like what it looked like. That's what was stated publicly. Now, right after, we should note, the incursion, he stepped down. I don't think he was fired, but he stepped down. We don't know where. We just could have disappeared from the scene. And I think it's safe to say that at best, this was a significant mistake. This was a faux pas. But at worst, it might have gone to not collusion, but perhaps a setting up of a situation where this would happen. I mean, who benefited from Congress being interrupted on that day? You know, what do they think? Donald Trump wanted to stop the count as if that somehow was going to keep him in office? I mean, really? Does that make sense? I mean, that's idiotic. I mean, obviously that could not happen in this country. They just have to recount it another moment, which they did, by the way, and then they confirmed Biden as president. So that isn't what the issue was here. That's ridiculous. The issue was that on that day, January 6th, there was to be a joint session of Congress presided over by Vice President Pence, who was acting as the president of the session. And it was at that time that the delegates were to present themselves to be counted for the election of the president. And there were 7 states that had elected alternative delegations. The official sponsored delegation was the Biden delegation. The alternative delegations were Trump delegations. And the alternatives were claiming that their respective states had improprieties in the election, that there was problems with the voting. There were various issues that they wanted to bring up, which indicated that their particular elections in their respective states had been corrupted. And each state was a little different. You know, there were laws that were enacted without congressional approval, which they argued, and I think rightfully, is unconstitutional, because the Constitution, Article 1, Section 3, says that the state legislators shall make laws with regard to elections. So there was the claim that this meant that those elections were not appropriate, were unconstitutional. Congress was not consulted. There was no debate. There was no vote on the part of the people. And that there were other situations in each of the states. There were other evidence that there had been improprieties. And that on that day, the states would have the opportunity to present that evidence and debate it. And the way that would happen is that you would have to have at least one House member joined by one senator who would sign a joint letter contesting the election in that particular state. And then the state would then have up to 2 hours to present the evidence, and that evidence would be viewed by the public. It would be televised. The media would be there. Both sides would have a chance to debate it. we would maybe get to the bottom of it in terms of hearing it and then hearing the other side. President Donald Trump and his supporters were looking forward to this. I was looking forward to it. The protesters were there to support this process, to try to say, let's have the evidence. Let's hear the evidence from these 7 states. This was not only entirely constitutional, but this had happened numerous times in the past, in numerous elections. In 2004, the state of Ohio was contested by, and it was Senator Barbara Boxer of California that was the senator who filed the contestation, along with a Representative McKinney, I think, from Ohio. So this had happened again in 2012, I believe, again in Ohio. So, I mean, we could look at the history of it. I think it goes way back. There is nothing, constitutionally questionable about that. The Constitution literally has this in it, or it's certainly settled law. And there were 7 states that had contested their elections: Georgia, Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Nevada, and Arizona. And then the 7th state, New Mexico, is a state where Biden had won clearly, but there was enough evidence, apparently, or believed to be enough evidence, that they had elected an alternative delegation and that they wanted to contest their state. So you have 7 states. The vice president, acting as president of the session, then calls out each state in alphabetical order, and each state either presents their delegation to be certified, or they have one senator and one rep stand up and contest, in which case then there's a 2-hour session, or up to 2 hours, to present the alternative views. Now, if this had gone on as planned, you would have had probably the process stretch out for the rest of the day, possibly into the next day, maybe even into Friday, because, 2-hour sessions are lengthy. And we were looking forward to hearing this evidence. This could have turned the tide, because at the end of the day, at the end of this testimony, the vice president, acting as president of the session, could choose to either ignore the evidence and certify the Biden delegates, certify the Trump delegates, or, which is very possible, simply refuse to certify any of the delegates, in which case that state's election would not be counted. And if that happened, then there would have been the at least, not that the Trump side would have picked up delegates, but the Biden side would have lost a sufficient number of delegates to the point where his candidacy would have gone below the required number to become president, which was 270. And if that happened at the end of the entire session, after the final state had been called, and neither candidate had enough delegates to reach that threshold, then there is a special session of Congress in which each state sends up one delegate. And this has nothing to do with the present elected Congress. And so therefore you have a special session where there are 50 delegates for 50 states. Every state is equal. California delegate is no more powerful than Rhode Island's delegate, right? I mean, New York's delegate is no more powerful than Alaska's delegate. Every state has one delegate. And that delegate is appointed by the state houses, the state legislators, not the governor, not the courts, not some other entity, but the state legislator. That is very key, because there are 31 state legislatures that are Republican. The Republicans have a majority. And that means that, barring something unforeseen, 31 of the delegates appointed by the state legislators would support the Republican nominee, that being Donald Trump, in which case Donald Trump would have been certified as the president. This has happened in history before. This happened with Rutherford B. Hayes in 1877. This happened with Thomas Jefferson in 1801. So this is not unprecedented. And so the point I'm making here is that that session was the last hope on the part of those who contested the election to have the election evidence heard and to possibly expose the level of impropriety that would lead to a different result, okay? Whether or not it would or not, that we'll never know because it never happened. You know, if people say, oh, there was no fraud, really? How do you know? We never got to hear the evidence. The courts never heard it. The media never vetted it. And the third stool on the wheel, the Congress, which was the last hope, they never did it because of the incursion. Because the guy with the buffalo suit showed up and all of the other people around him, and the Congress went out of session. So any investigation, you have to ask, who gained? Clearly, Trump did not gain from this. And when you take a look at the fact that, and this was, by the way, I mean, and I watched this live on television in real time. This happened just as Arizona was called, and just as the Arizona delegation, in the full view of the entire country, with the media, filming and reporters, just as they started to lay out the evidence, and it was stunning, right? Just as that was unfolding, everything came to a stop. The incursion had occurred. Everybody disappeared. And following that, Congress reconvened around midnight and just gavelled Biden in. There was no debate. The 7 states were not heard. They never will be heard. The evidence was not presented. And Biden was gavelled in. So who gained? Who gained from this? I think that if you take these factors and you juxtapose them with the possible evidence that the Sergeant at Arms of the U.S. Capitol, who answers directly to Nancy Pelosi and who is de facto Nancy Pelosi's mouthpiece because he doesn't have the authority to do this on his own or her own. The buck stops with Pelosi. She is the Speaker of the House. The fact that they did not want the National Guard to be called out, I mean, that looks very fishy to me. I don't know about you followers right now, but, that doesn't smell right. Anyway, I'm going to wrap things up, but I want to give out the phone number in case anybody would like to join me again. 617-396-4958. 617-396-4958. And my guest, apparently, possibly because of a blackout in Seattle, it was supposed to be Ari Hoffman. He isn't here. I'll reschedule him for another time. You'll stay tuned to the station if you want to get that information. His article is Democrat Congresswoman says America needs a truth commission to create common narrative. Let me just finish reading the article. She goes on to say, we talked about she wants to hold Trump accountable for the Capitol. Okay, I got that. But that we need to make sure we are doing accountability of anyone who incited, encouraged, or committed acts of violence. Hear, hear. Who's been committing acts of violence throughout the last months in the summer of love? Trump's team did a brilliant job of showing congressmen, including Pelosi herself, and my own congressman here in Boston, Ayanna Pressley, supporting violence in the cities where black businesses were looted, black neighborhoods were burned. There was an increase in crime in black neighborhoods where black citizens were murdered, including children, to a huge uptick. Who was supporting that? And who was committing that? You think those were Trump supporters? Really? So, yeah, let's have that discussion. Let's see who incites violence. Who burned St. John's Church across the street from the White House? Who was heading for the Lincoln Memorial? Who was defacing all these memorials around this country, including the Robert Gould Shaw statue in front of the Massachusetts State House, which honors the Massachusetts Regiment during the Civil War that was predominantly black? Who defaced that? Was that a Trump supporter, you think? I don't think so. Okay. And then really looking forward at kinds of things like truth commissions, like democracy, like institution building that we know are going to be the real fixes on what we have in this country. Okay. So that's what we have. I'm going to try to get Andy Ngo on this program. He's written a book about Antifa, and he's looked at it firsthand. That's coming up, I think, next week. I think on that note, I'm going to thank you all for joining me today. I will reschedule Ari Hoffman, who wrote this article. I think that it was pointed out to me, he's probably having a blackout in Seattle. Thank you very much, TikTok. I appreciate it. God bless America. God bless all of you. Let's stay safe. Let's keep speaking truth to power. Thank you very much. Oh, and by the way, not to get in a shameless plug here, but please subscribe to my YouTube channel because I am being shadow banned. I've been told by people that they subscribe to it and then their subscriptions mysteriously taken away. So please subscribe on YouTube and on TikTok, which I'm also being shadow banned. And my books, I have over 15 nonfiction books, including my latest, Toward Fascist America, available at Amazon Books. Put my name in the server, Charles Moscowitz, Moscow, like Moscow, Witz, and you will see them come up on the Amazon Books. So thanks again for joining me, everyone. God bless. I shall return, God willing, tomorrow at 12 noon. By the way, I'll be back at 2 o'clock with Michael Shaw for a special edition. And I hope you all have a blessed afternoon.